I wasn't supposed to be awake this early on a Saturday, but the smell of coffee from the corner cafe pulled me out of bed before my alarm even had a chance to buzz. I walked in, shrugged out of my jacket, and took my usual spot by the window, the one where I could watch the street wake up without feeling like anyone was watching me. She was there. Of course she was. Mid-40s, mid-morning calm, hair tucked behind her ears in that careless way that somehow made it look intentional. I froze for a moment, not in awe, exactly, but in that quiet recognition that some people leave marks you can't explain. Double espresso, right? She said before I even opened my mouth, glancing at my usual order scribbled on the little card the barista handed her. Her tone wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't supposed to be. It was just precise, like she knew me in ways I hadn't realized myself. I nodded. Yeah, thanks. My voice sounded too loud in the tiny cafe. I folded the corner of my napkin twice, a useless habit, just to fill the space where I wanted to say more but couldn't. She handed me the cup, fingers brushing mine briefly. I caught the movement out of the corner of my eye, the faint tremor in her hand, and for a second, I imagined that she noticed me noticing it. I doubted it. People like her always seem to notice things without being noticed themselves. I watched her stir her own coffee with a slow, deliberate twist of the spoon. She smiled at the barista, then, just slightly at me. Not a full smile. Just enough to make me pause mid-sip and realize I'd been staring. My eyes flicked down to my cup, but the warmth of it didn't reach the hollow in my chest where the loneliness usually lived. I had a habit of writing texts to people I didn't mean to send. My thumb hovered over the keyboard of my phone, drafting sentences that would never escape the drafts folder. I typed her name once, accidentally, I told myself, and deleted it before the thought could finish. You always come here this early? She asked, leaning back in her chair just enough to cross one ankle over the other. The light caught the curve of her cheekbones, but I didn't focus. I noticed the small scar on her wrist instead, probably from something mundane, something perfectly ordinary. I didn't ask about it. That would have been too intrusive. Sometimes, I muttered, when I can't sleep. She tilted her head, quiet, thoughtful. Then she laughed. A short, soft thing, almost swallowed by the cafe noise. I realized I hadn't heard her laugh before. Or maybe I had, and I just never paid attention. Guess insomnia has its perks, she said. Her eyes flicked to my cup and back again, as if considering a joke she wasn't willing to tell yet. I tried to smile back, but I don't think it reached my eyes. I cleared my throat instead and took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth seep into me slowly. I wanted to ask her something, anything, but the words stalled in my chest. Before I could think too hard about it, she stood, smoothly, like she had somewhere else to be, but her gaze lingered just a second too long. She leaned down and whispered something that made my chest tighten. One taste of me, and you'll beg for more, she said, and then she was gone. The bell over the door jingled. I blinked. My napkin remained folded on the table. My coffee was cooling, and on my phone, a new message had appeared. From her. It only said, "See you tonight?" I stared at it longer than I should have, thumb hovering again, this time over reply. I didn't know what I wanted to say, but I knew I couldn't ignore it. I found myself standing in the dim hallway of her building later that evening, holding a small package I'd been meaning to drop off for the tenant 2 floors down. She opened the door before I could knock. The smell of faint lavender and old books hit me first. Thanks for coming up, she said, her voice quieter than in the cafe. She moved aside to let me in, but I lingered in the doorway. She gestured toward the small kitchen. Tea. I nodded, trying not to fumble with the package. She disappeared behind the counter, and the quiet clink of spoons against mugs filled the pause. When she returned, she set a steaming cup in front of me, her fingers brushing mine for a second that lasted a little too long. I tried not to notice the faint tremor in her hand again. We sat across from each other at the tiny table, a single bulb casting warm light over the chipped paint. I used to make tea for my father every morning, she said suddenly. as if the words were carefully weighed before leaving her lips. He liked it strong, a little bitter. I smiled uncertainly. Sounds like someone who knew what they wanted. She tilted her head, eyes softening. He did, and he left me this building after he passed. It's quieter than I expected. Sometimes I think it's too quiet. I stirred my tea slowly, imagining the small, orderly apartment she must have inherited. My chest tightened with something I didn't want to name. Here she was, mid-40s, carrying loss like it was nothing, and I was 25, fumbling through my own life with more uncertainty than I could admit aloud. We talked, mostly in pauses, small observations. The way her mug had a tiny chip on the rim, how the steam curled up in lazy circles, the ticking of the wall clock that seemed too loud in the stillness. I caught myself imagining what it would be like if none of the usual boundaries existed, if I could reach out and touch her arm without thinking twice. The thought made my stomach twist with guilt and longing at once. She laughed softly at some imagined memory she didn't share, and I realized I was holding my breath, waiting for a crack in the quiet. The kind of silence that feels like it's holding secrets it shouldn't. I reached over instinctively, just to push the sugar packet closer to her, and our fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. She looked at me, not with expectation, not with judgment, but with a quiet acknowledgement that made my heart pound. I wanted to ask her if she'd ever regretted anything, if she ever felt lonely like I did, but the words got caught in my throat. Instead, I folded my hands over my mug, tracing its rim with my thumb and watching her watch me. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought, almost out loud, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She smiled faintly, eyes crinkling in that way that suggested she understood more than she let on. Then she reached across the table, lightly brushing my knuckle with her fingers, a small gesture, almost accidental, but it felt like the world had shifted a little in that quiet apartment. And just like that, I knew this connection was dangerous, complicated, and forbidden in ways neither of us wanted to name. But I couldn't look away. I didn't plan to see her that evening, but the building felt emptier than usual, and I found myself wandering toward her apartment again, like a moth circling a dim light. She was in the hallway, fumbling with her keys. "Oh," she said, startled, pulling her hand back like she'd been caught. "I didn't hear you." I shrugged, unsure whether to step closer or retreat. "Just passing by." She laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was a shadow there, something she wasn't ready to share. I noticed the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she kept her hands busy with the keys as if that would keep her from noticing me noticing her. We ended up in her kitchen again, tea steeping quietly while the city outside muted itself. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice stuck. So I let my eyes wander to the small things, the faint scratch on the counter, the way her bracelet caught the light, the subtle crease at the corner of her mouth. She glanced at me and hesitated. Then she said, almost as an afterthought, "I should finish some work tonight. Can we not stay too long?" My stomach sank. I'd been drifting closer, leaning in, imagining crossing the unspoken line, and she pulled back with a quiet firmness. The tea between us cooled, untouched, while I fiddled with the rim of my cup. My thumb traced the chipped edge again. Habit, maybe, but also a shield. A noise from the hallway startled us. One of the tenants, a friend of mine, called out, and she tensed, a flicker of something unreadable passing over her face. I realized just how fragile this bubble was, how easily the moment could shatter. I cleared my throat, trying to look casual, but I couldn't stop imagining what it would be like if I reached out, if I just leaned in. She caught my glance, the corner of her mouth twitching as if she noticed the thought before I did. Her hand hovered near mine on the table, almost touching, then pulled back as if afraid it would give too much away. I wanted to laugh, awkwardly, to break the tension, but even that felt risky. Maybe I should go," I muttered. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, long enough for the quiet to thicken, for me to feel her pulse in the space between us. I wanted to ask her something reckless, something that would blur the line completely, but the words died. Instead, our hands brushed, lightly, fleetingly, but enough to send a shiver up my arm. I leaned in, almost, as if the air itself wanted to push us closer, but she leaned back, eyes dropping, her lips parting slightly in hesitation. That half-step, that half-breath, spoke louder than any confession. And then, before anything could happen, the city hummed outside the window, and the ordinary world intruded. My pulse slowed. Her hands folded neatly on the table. Tea steamed in silence. We were caught in that delicate in-between, wanting, resisting, unsure. I left with my cup empty, my mind replaying the moment we nearly crossed the line. A smile, a brush of fingers, a hesitation, and a quiet, relentless pull of something neither of us dared name. The park was nearly empty that evening, the sun low and soft against the branches. I found her sitting on a weathered bench, sketchbook open but pencil idle. She didn't look up when I approached, and for a moment I considered turning back. "Hey," I said softly, dropping into the seat beside her. She didn't answer right away. Just let her hand hover over the page, tracing a line she wasn't drawing. The air smelled faintly of damp leaves and old paper, comforting and strange at once. "I saw you talking to him today," I said, nodding toward a neighbor's kid across the field. My stomach tightened even as I tried to sound casual. She shifted, her gaze falling to her shoes. "Oh, that wasn't anything." I hesitated, unsure how to follow, and then let the silence stretch. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but heavy with what's not being said. I don't know why my words faltered, caught in the middle of something dangerous. I don't like seeing you with other people, even if it's nothing." Her hand froze on the page. The pencil rolled slightly between her fingers. She looked at me then, really looked, as if measuring how much she could show without falling. She exhaled slowly, gaze dropping again. You're. Her sentence broke, and she let it. Let the thought hang between us, unfinished. I shifted closer, careful not to overstep, feeling the pull of something I didn't dare name. "It's okay," I muttered, but it wasn't okay. I wanted to lean in, to close the gap, but the weight of her silence told me she wasn't ready, or maybe that she never would be. She laughed softly, almost bitterly. "I feel ridiculous." "No," I said. "Not ridiculous. Just human." We sat like that for a long moment, both of us aware of the line we weren't crossing. The wind moved through the branches, scattered leaves at our feet, and I wanted to say so many things, confessions, warnings, promises, but none of them made it past my throat. Then she looked at me, and the wall she'd built wavered. I think I like the way you notice things about me, even the small stuff." Her voice was barely above a whisper. My heart tightened. "Yeah?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual, but I knew she could hear the tremor in my voice. She nodded, eyes softening. And just like that, it felt like a confession without words. A truth we both understood but weren't ready to name fully. We leaned back slightly on the bench, careful distance maintained, yet closer than before. My hand twitched, wanted to reach for hers, but I stopped. The hesitation itself spoke. "I shouldn't be feeling this," she said, almost to herself. "But I do." The question hung unspoken between us, louder than any sentence could be. "What do we do now?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The wind, the leaves, the soft fading light, they all seemed to hold it for us. And for a moment, I thought everything might change, or nothing ever would. I didn't see her for a week. At first, I thought she was busy, maybe work, errands, the usual rhythm of her life. But the apartment door remained closed, the mailbox untouched. The cafés we'd passed together felt quieter without her voice lingering in the corners. I tried texting her once, just checking in. No reply. Twice more. Nothing. I deleted the drafts, then rewrote them. Deleted again. My thumb hovered over the send button, always stopping. When I finally saw her, it was through the cafe window. She was with someone else, her niece, maybe, or a friend I hadn't met. She laughed easily, the kind of laughter I thought I'd only heard in private moments. My chest tightened, though I told myself it was nothing. I walked past without saying hello, like an invisible ghost. Later that evening, I sat on my bed staring at my phone. Unsent messages piled up like unread chapters in a book I wasn't allowed to finish. I can't stop thinking about you. Do you even want me here? I shouldn't. I pressed delete over and over. The next day, she appeared at the building, keys in hand, a polite smile fixed in place. Hey, she said, but the warmth was gone. Something in her eyes flickered, guarded, hesitant. She didn't ask why I hadn't texted, didn't mention the cafe. Just moved past me like we were strangers passing in a hallway. I wanted to ask, to demand clarity, but the words lodged in my throat. So I stood there, awkward, fumbling with the strap of my bag, pretending the wind had my attention. She glanced at me, noticed the hesitation. I have things I need to sort out, she said, voice quiet, careful. And then she was gone, sliding the door shut behind her before I could reach for it. I sat on the steps outside, watching the door as if it might open again, though I knew it wouldn't. My chest ached, but not the sharp, crying kind of ache. It was quieter, almost hollow, like someone had hit pause on my chest and left me suspended. I remembered the bench, our near confession, her fingers brushing mine. I tried to summon it, replay it, cling to the memory, but each recollection was tainted with a distance I couldn't cross. I drafted another message that night. I don't know what I did wrong. Deleted it. Drafted again. Do you still want to see me? Deleted. My phone felt heavier than usual, as if carrying unsaid words made it tangible. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. On the small wooden bench outside her apartment, her seat remained empty. I stared at it, tracing the worn edges with my eyes, imagining her there, imagining what we might have said if timing hadn't slipped through our fingers. And for the first time, I wondered if the pause was permanent, or just a longer part of the story we didn't know how to tell. I found her in the kitchen that evening, the same one where we'd shared tea weeks ago. The light from the single overhead bulb was warm, but it didn't chase away the tension that had settled between us. She was rinsing a cup, her fingers lingering on the handle longer than necessary, like she was rehearsing something in silence. I didn't know if I should speak. My mouth felt heavy, weighted with all the drafts I had written and deleted over the past days. Instead, I leaned against the counter, hands shoved in my pockets, pretending to examine the chipped tile beneath my feet. She glanced at me, and I thought for a second she might retreat. But then she took a step closer, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth from her body, the subtle scent of her hair brushing the edge of my awareness. I didn't mean to pull away, she said, voice low, careful. Not an apology exactly, but the closest thing to one I'd hear from her. I nodded, my throat tight. I wasn't sure what to do either. Her eyes met mine, and something in them cracked. Not fully, just enough to let me see the vulnerability she usually hid behind poise and polite distance. I wanted to say everything I'd felt in the week she vanished, all the longing, the confusion, the fear of being too much. But the words stayed lodged, fragile, unsaid. Instead, I took a step forward. She didn't move back. Our hands brushed, again, like before, but this time it didn't need to linger to matter. The simple connection said more than sentences ever could. I like being around you, she murmured, almost embarrassed. Even if it's complicated. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of that acknowledgement settle. Yeah, I said. My voice cracked just slightly, but she didn't comment. Instead, she smiled faintly, the corners of her eyes crinkling in that quiet, human way that always caught me off guard. The moment stretched. Neither of us moved closer. Neither of us stepped away. We just existed together in the kitchen, two people who had finally allowed themselves to be seen. I wanted to say more, but I realized I didn't need to. Sometimes, words only dilute what's already understood. She reached over and flicked a stray crumb from the counter near my elbow, her fingers brushing mine once more. That tiny gesture, the simplicity of it, felt like permission. Permission to be here, permission to exist in this suspended space without fear, without expectation. Okay, she said softly, almost to herself. Okay, I echoed, letting the word hold everything we hadn't spoken. And in that quiet kitchen, with the hum of the refrigerator and the faint clink of cups drying on the rack, it felt like we had crossed the invisible line, not with a kiss or a declaration, but with something steadier, acknowledgement, presence, a fragile trust in the moment. No one else needed to know. We simply existed there, together, and it was enough. It was 8:47 a.m., exactly the way I liked it. Quiet streets, coffee brewing, sunlight just tipping the edges of the buildings. She was already in the kitchen, black coffee in her favorite chipped mug, hair tied back loosely like she didn't care if it was perfect. I leaned against the counter doorway, watching her, and felt the familiar, low hum of something I couldn't quite name but didn't need to. "Morning," I said softly. She looked up, eyes crinkling in that small, private smile. "Morning. You made it," she said, though she didn't sound surprised anymore. It was just acknowledged. Accepted. We moved around each other in the kitchen, the small routines we'd established over weeks settling into something comfortable. I poured my own coffee, the black liquid steaming in the morning light, and she stirred hers slowly, just like the first day I'd noticed her careful hands. Later, we went for a walk. Not the bench in the park from before, not the moments of near confession, but just down the quiet street where leaves gathered in corners and the city hadn't yet started to shout. She walked beside me, not ahead, not behind, just beside. We didn't need words. The simple act of being there was enough. At the corner cafe, I noticed her thumb tracing the rim of her mug, a tiny habit I remembered from the first time I'd met her. I wanted to point it out, to say, I noticed, but instead I just smiled. She glanced at me, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. That was enough too. Life didn't feel perfect. Bills waited on the counter. Tenants knocked on the wrong doors. Coffee got cold if you forgot it. But it felt warmer, easier, honest, like we were allowed to be ourselves, flawed and quiet and human. I thought about the bench where we almost admitted everything, the city lights that had kept our conversations suspended, the week of absence that had taught me patience. All of it folded into the present moment, into the simple act of walking beside her, coffee in hand, sunlight warming our shoulders. She paused at a small intersection, glanced at me, and for a second the world slowed. The wind lifted a stray strand of hair from her face. I reached out, brushing it back lightly. No grand gesture, no speech, just the small touch that meant we were here, together, and had chosen this. "Ready?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "Always." And in that word, in that tiny motion, the quiet life we'd built spoke louder than anything we could have said. The city hummed around us, and we walked on, side by side, because sometimes love didn't need declaration. Sometimes it only needed presence, acknowledgement, and the permission to be seen. Later, when the sun hit the windows just so, and the coffee steam curled lazily into the morning, I thought, she notices the small things. I notice her noticing me, and that's enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?